Final score, Michigan State 83, Kentucky 66. The Spartans handled them no problems in the first half, then continued that in the second half. And after the game, one of the more interesting press conferences you'll ever see. Before I chime in, just you take it because you were in the room. What did you make of Mark Pope after a second loss of the season, expressing real concerns in his own words for the basketball team he has put together?
Yeah. In fact, Josh, if we can in post, we can't do this for our live audience, but in post, let's maybe drop in the Pope clip from the presser so people can really listen and hear more context. We had it on HQ last night as well. Pope was shattered, dejected. He was giving short answers to the media, not in a disrespectful way, but almost in a way of like, I need to hold my tongue on some stuff right now. But to his credit, I mean, he, after the press conference was over, he had to in the hallway. He did, post-game radio with Kentucky. He did another interview after that. I spoke with him really briefly. It took him almost 50 minutes to get to the post-game presser to begin with. That locker room scene must have really been something. I actually, now, as coincidence would have it, I was in the city earlier on Tuesday, so I was able to spend some time with Kentucky in advance of the game. So I was with them for their film review for the scout there, and then went over to the arena with them. And I actually Pope and I got to talking about a few different things. And as we were talking about the game ahead and the season so far and the loss to Louisville, this quote, I won't read off it here. It's in the story. We can link it in the pod and the YouTube description as well. But Pope basically said, our guys don't know how physical they can be yet. They don't know yet what it actually feels like to play your guts out he's like, I want to have a rotation of 10, 11 guys. Okay. And if we're going to do that, and guys are only going to be asked to play 22, 23 minutes a game, but everyone's going to get a bite of the apple, they need to just run their guts out, and they don't know how to hit that limit yet. And we're going to play this Michigan State team. Now, Pope had never coached against Izzo, period. That was evident by the first game that he went up against him. But he knew his team was going to need to have a level of physicality for this game. Now, some of it was Michigan State was hot from three. It's not like Michigan State it was an Izzo team from 2004, and they just dominated the paint, dominated the inside. That's not exactly what it was, obviously. Michigan State got super hot from three. But it was unintentionally prophetic from Pope to hear him talk about this stuff 8 hours before the game was final. And then you fast forward and you see the way that Kentucky lost. He was absolutely right. He took full responsibility. It is rare to see a coach like that after a game in November. It's year two. Obviously, this job is one with a ton of challenges. And the one thing I didn't put in the column that I got to talking to Pope about right before the shoot around was he was essentially saying, if you can't handle everything that comes with this job, then you can't take the job. Like, it's not always going to be roses and rainbows. There's going to be tough moments. And I hope after tonight, we're going to have met the challenge. Well, that didn't happen. So I credit Pope for facing the criticism. The honeymoon is over. This is his first actual crisis as the coach of Kentucky. Kentucky fans think the rotation is too deep, even not having Jalen Lowe, which is a massive issue. They don't have their point guard and maybe Quaintance,
their best NBA prospect.
And best NBA prospect. But even as I wrote, even without that, Parrish, it doesn't excuse the performance that they put on Tuesday night in Midtown Manhattan. It was bizarrely bad. They did cut it to 10, but they cut it to 10. Michigan State, I think, either got it to 14 or they got it to 12 on consecutive possessions. And Kentucky's spirit was broken in the second half. They weren't going to win the game. They couldn't win the game. There's a laundry list of issues. And just as, national pundits in the sport and seeing the fallout in real time following some of the commentary on social media and then afterward, it will be interesting to see how Kentucky pivots to this, because there's been a lot of just stuff attached to Kentucky so far this season. They have so much more to go. They don't have a high profile game for about 2 more weeks. But the whole scene in the presser was interesting. And then Pope actually, and Josh, I should have sent you this photo. Pope got done his press conference. And then what typically happens is if a coach speaks first and the players are with them, the coach will then leave the room, go back to the locker room and let the players say what they're going to say. Or it's often the reverse angle where the players will go first, they'll leave, then the coach will come in and talk. That didn't happen. Pope got done And then he wanted to hear what his players had to say. So he was standing just off to the side while Otega Owe took questions. And it was, yeah, it was an odd scene. Not, I guess odd is putting it too harshly. It was atypical. And I know that Pope is wearing that loss really hard. So I know I went long, but there's a ton attached to this game. And I want to see if this is going to be the kind of thing that actually like is stuck to the team for the rest of the season because of how Pope reacted, or if we're just, okay, it's early, you took a couple of losses, we look up in January and UK's doing just fine, and that was just an early bump in the road.
Yeah, maybe. But if I were a UK fan, I would be concerned about how my coach looks and sounds because he seems concerned. Yep. Nobody should have a better grasp for what this basketball team's going to be or can be or is than Mark Pope, and he seems concerned. So I was sitting there watching this last night with my wife, with my whole family, and my wife has no context for anything when it comes to college basketball. Like I could say anything right now, and it's probably not going to get back to her. She doesn't know who Mark Pope is. She doesn't know if he's supposed to have a good team or not. She couldn't probably tell you what NIL is, but she watched the press conference, and afterwards, like the second he got done talking, you know what she said? I typed it just so I would have it exactly right. God, that's depressing. She was like, what is going on? She's like, what is happening? Tell me what's going on with this guy and his team. And I was like, well, they spent 20 plus million on a roster. It has been described as the most expensive basketball team in the history of college athletics. Mm-hmm. And they were favorites at tip off, down by 17 at the half, lost by 17. And he looks like a man who's starting to feel it a little bit. One of the things that I think we all learned last season and liked was that he really reconnected with the fan base and with the local media, and in a way that John Calipari kind of got away from. Like John sort of detached from everybody and insulated himself because, I don't know, just I guess when you have that job that long, anytime you go through a downtime, it's going to get intense and maybe you don't emotionally bounce back from that the way you would hope. But John kind of detached at the end at UK in a variety of ways. And Mark seemed to intentionally reconnect with fans, with Kentucky Sports Radio, everything under that umbrella.
For sure.
Well, the problem with really being online and connecting and and having a real grasp for what the fan base is saying and thinking and feeling is that when it gets like this, you have a real grasp for what they're saying and feeling, and you hear it and you're in it. And it looked like that was taking a toll on him last night. It looks like he is very aware that his own fans are saying, did we really pay $20 million for this? Mm-hmm. And then that goes to, well, remember when we hired the guy, we were wondering, should we have done this really? And now you're back in that stuff, and this is hard. I've said this about, there's a handful of jobs like this. The Kentucky job is perhaps the biggest example of it. Oh man, there's nothing better when it's going well, but when it's not, I don't know that there's anything worse or tougher to deal with.
One line from my column last night: this kind of crisis is the exact reason why Kentucky and John Calipari had to split 18 months ago, making way for Pope to restore unbridled optimism at his alma mater. And then another line is, essentially, I'm going to paraphrase it here, is the real drawback to being a team that spends a ton of money on its roster is that if it does not go the way that you want it to go, then that's the thing that's attached to your team. That's what people reference all the time. That's what your identity is. And as I wrote, that is Kentucky's identity right now. For now, and maybe in a month they can elevate their play. They can establish themselves as a top 10 team and get this done. But for now, this is the team that spent more money in the portal than anyone else, that doesn't have a high major win, that is out of sorts, and is going to be referred to as, the biggest overspenders in college basketball. They can move out of that, but in the here and now, that's what they are. Pope, just to reiterate the point, he did, multiple times just take all the blame. Like there were some questions that were very good questions in the press conference that were trying to get Pope to talk about some things that the players did not do or came up short. And he just very craftily didn't allow the players to take any of the blame on this, even though, quite frankly, a lot of it is on Pope. You assemble the roster, you spend all this money, and it's not working. But players also didn't play well. They didn't have the physicality. They fell way short. And on the Michigan State side, and Spartans fans, I know you're super excited. We're going to talk about your team as well here. While you look at Michigan State, you look at Tom Izzo, everything he stands for, he got asked about roster retention in the portal, and he gave some quotes on that. It's not like Kentucky is entirely a new team. That's not what this is. Right. Kentucky does return pieces that played for this team last year, guys that played real minutes. They just happened to bring on a lot of other pieces that were in the portal. I think Michigan State might be returning 6 players from a season ago. Kentucky is returning 4. So it's not like this vast chasm overall. But at the very heart of it, you did have one team on one side, Michigan State, which has a point guard. Jeremy Fears was awesome. I think he took 3 or 4 shots, had 13 assists, was the most impactful player on the floor. Very stark to see him doing what he was doing, and Kentucky not having Jalen Lowe. Denzel Aberdeen's not a point guard, and they got to try and figure out what they're going to do between Aberdeen, Owe. Jasper Johnson is not remotely there physically yet, so they got a huge issue there. But for Michigan State to play as connected as it did, Kurt Tang comes off the bench and scores a career-high 15. Jackson Kohler, a senior, just like a typical Izzo guy growing into it. He goes for 20. And you see what Izzo stands for, what he talks about all the time, and how that really coalesced into a win on Tuesday night versus the mercenary. I'm not saying this is what it is, but you can frame it this way with Kentucky, the mercenary, the guns for hire, the super expensive roster that just, they look like they were still getting to know each other's names on the floor last night. So it's glaring. Doesn't help that this is coming off the Louisville loss where they were competitive, but Louisville just outplayed them in that game as well. And you also got this weird attachment where like something happened before the Louisville game in the locker room, and Pope referenced it, but he won't give details, and he still hasn't said what it is. I honestly don't really care about this, but Kentucky, it's the fan base. It's actually like, it's a weird misstep for Pope, because then after the Eastern Illinois game, in the post game, he like referenced how Taylor Swift likes to leave, her fans little Easter eggs and stuff. Like, you can't do that stuff and then lose these games, because it's not that the fan base is turning on Pope, because it's not. We're still early, but they will. This is Kentucky, man. They will hold you to account immediately with this stuff. And this is the first true moment. And I use the word intentionally. Like, it's a small crisis, but this is a crisis. When you are Kentucky, when this is your alma mater, when you reportedly spend in the neighborhood of $20 million on your roster, and you have 2 high-profile flops against NCAA tournament teams to start the season, you got to figure it out quick. Kentucky's only saving grace right now is it's got 2 weeks before it has another high major opponent. So we'll see if they can course correct.
A few more things on Kentucky than on Michigan State. You're right. They bring back, this gets called like the most expensive team because of what they spent in the transfer portal, but they did bring back like some meaningful players, including the preseason SEC Player of the Year,
who's getting paid a ton. So like that's also where the money's going, obviously. Yeah.
Right. They you ready for this? They brought back more players this season than they had brought back last season, right? Because that was totally fresh last year. So it's inaccurate to just say, well, this is what happens when you have a whole new team, because they don't have a whole new team. But they do have a lot of new players. And I do think this is what can happen when you are more or less getting married after speed dating, because that's what all this stuff is. You don't really know the people you're getting. I hear this from do you hear this from coaches all the time? I used to know who I was signing. I don't know who I'm signing now. I've got somebody on my staff working in analytics who tells me this is the type of statistically, this is the type of person we should be looking at. And then I get him on film and I go, okay, I like what I'm seeing here. And then I talk to him on Zoom, and then I give him $800,000. That's how this stuff is working. And it looked like last night, and maybe it was actually perfect that Kentucky got exposed by Michigan State, because it looked like last night you had a basketball program that beat basketball players. That's what I watched. I watched a basketball game, and the basketball program beat the team that had just a bunch of basketball players that still don't know how to play together and might not really love each other the way that you would hope. Whereas with Tom Izzo, and I talked to Tom about this in Illinois, in Chicago, greater Chicago area, Big Ten Media Day. I love the way he talks about this stuff now. He's like, I don't like my profession anymore. Like, he's sort of detached from like trying to change the world. I'm just going to coach my basketball team, run my basketball program. I'm done with trying to fix everything or bitching about it. I'm just going to coach my basketball team and run my program. But even he says, like I was talking to, he said, listen, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm doing it the way it needs to be done. I don't even know if it's the right way to do it anymore, but it's the way I want to do it. And I wouldn't want to do it the other way. I want to have a locker room of guys who care about Michigan State because they've been here. And I don't want to have guys here for 2 years and then go sign somebody I met last week in the transfer portal because I couldn't get my guys that I have been living and dying with good enough. I mean, I'm going to do that sometimes because I have to, but that's not the way I want to run my program. I want to have guys who are here for 2, 3, 4 years, and that's the way I'm going to go out. And I don't know that it'll work without hiccup. I don't know that it won't get him caught some year. Shaka might be getting caught by that same sort of mentality right now. But I like it. I like that he sticks to it. I like that he's committed to it. And last night it seemed to pay off. That, he's got the point guard that he keeps comparing to Mateen Cleaves.
Yes.
He's got, and he loves Mateen. So if he ever puts your name in that sentence,
for sure,
then you are special in his mind. And Jeremy Fears, like you said, I agree. Statistically, perhaps if you just look at points and that kind of stuff, not the most impressive player on the court last night, but he controlled the basketball game and is the main reason Michigan State controlled the basketball game from start to finish. I don't know that Michigan State's going to win the Big Ten or go to a Final Four with this roster, but they shot the ball well and looked like a competent Michigan State basketball team last night. And on the other side, it just didn't look like that at all.